This is way too much about ozone in Chapter 4. The wavelengths screened by ozone happen to be precisely the wavelengths absorbed by 1W. I think that should be a mu, and it probably means micron, but I really don't know. Just says here 1W period. I think that's a Greek letter mu. When radiation is absorbed, it turns to heat, which can damage cells. Less understood, but long suspected, is that organisms living near the ocean's surface may be killed in minutes by increased ultraviolet light, and that farm crops can be harmed. Scientists have been testing these effects in experiments with lamps intensified in the short wavelengths like the sun lamps used in tanning salons, and with lasers tuned to precise frequencies. And the aliens did all this research 200,000 years ago, and they have 200,000 years of data from their theories and solutions, and they could give that to us easily just to help us. Instead, we've got to suffer through our own 200,000 years of experimentation. When the message on the depletion of the ionosphere was originally transmitted to Edward Meyer by the Pleiadian extraterrestrials, he was told to transmit it directly to Professor Michael McElroy at Harvard, and the Pleiadians provided the postal address. The letter was sent. A most sobering situation here indeed. Either one of these drastic changes in the Earth's environment holds great dangers for all living things on this planet. Now, I want to stop here and say one sentence. If they really wanted to impress McElroy at Harvard, why didn't they land in his backyard, pick him up, and give him a ride, and talk to him on the spaceship? Now, would that be convincing? They can tell him what they found and give him the results, and he can take them with him back to his lab. They can communicate with him telepathically after that, and he'll be a believer. But just mailing this stuff off like some crackpot is not going to be very effective. What's wrong with these people? Okay, so either of these drastic changes in the Earth's environment holds great dangers for all living things on this planet. This was all predictable and was caused by man himself. And when we failed to realize our danger and ignored what we were doing to ourselves, no, what some of us were doing to the others of us is more like it. Why are we all one now? You know, are we sharing in the profits of the oil business as if we were all one? One guy has 94 Rolls Royces in Russia. That's not equal sharing. I don't want to share this responsibility and blame. Is what we're doing to ourselves. Benevolent extraterrestrials beings took it upon themselves to warn us. Yeah, in all the wrong ways. A warning that has gone unheeded because of the way that we were warned, to the point that the damage is done and the dangers are now irreversible. And whose fault is that? Who is the superior race here? If this is not cause for alarm, nothing is. Okay, thank you, Wendell. Remember, we were warned back in early 1975. We? Who was warned? You're warning people who have no idea what even causes it? And we were given figures and rates then by extraterrestrial observers at that time. Well, if the ETs are going to hide from us and not come out in the open and say, hey, look, we're here, we're real, we're giving you this information, take it seriously. Give them a ride in the spaceship to prove that it's real. You know, I don't understand how they think. The 26th contact on the 18th of June 1975 took place at the very early hour of 4 a.m., 4:11 a.m., where an interesting bit of information was developed. Sannyasi opened the conversation this time. She says, regretfully, a longer conversation is not possible for me now because I am obligated for a special task. Thus, in the coming time, I will not be able to come in contact with you as often. Please understand that we have to space out contacts more in time. Meyer asks, are you still going away? Sannyasi says, as I have been ordered, but I'm not leaving your solar system. Meyer asks, what about this moment with the demonstration? Sannyasi says, this does not deal with me. I think that should be this does not deal with my longer trip. before which I want to exercise the demonstration. Meyer says, I see. I thought we were finally at this point. Semyasi says, the time for that does not press, as I still have a lot to do before this. My new task is taking me only to some planets of your system and to your satellite, the moon. I want to go to these places. This is in connection with something that has happened since our last meeting. What happened? Which planets is she going to? What is she going to do there? How does she breathe in those atmospheres? Does she wear some sort of a spacesuit? Okay, then the editor makes a note. Since this material was received by us and translated for publication here, we have become involved in the investigation and publication of a very profound and extensive UFO case involving some extraterrestrial beings who seem to have an operating base on our moon that is set up about every 2 years and is manned and is used actively for something like 6 months, and then they leave and are gone for around 18 months before they come back again. This timing would fit a retrogressed cycle of the events we have been able to observe up to now. See UFO Abduction at Mirasol by Dr. Walter K. Buehler, this publisher. In a discussion about a space project, Meyer inquired if the Pleiadians had ever interfered in such projects and received a startling reply. Semyasi said, surely, but not we alone. We have followed the whole development and also influenced it in certain measures. I think that should be. On the other hand, we have had to trouble ourselves for the eliminations in different cases or to help projects fail. Meyer says that sounds like you have sometimes interfered in matters. Semyasi says, surely, if you want to consider it so. Meyer says, I want to tell it that way. There is something not fully evident for me, because you just made a strange comment that you are not the only ones who are keeping their eyes and ears open in these concerns, and have interfered. Are you concealing something from me? And this not only now, for some time I have noticed you're having a secret ahead of me, where it always seemed like you were waiting for my question. Semyasi asks, can't you imagine what it is? Meyer says, I'm having my assumptions here. Semyasi says, then tell it. Meyer says, I'm not stupid, as later it will sound from the other side like I made a fool of myself. And Semyasi said, your sudden fear is unknown for you. It does not fit. Meyer says, all right, you've got me. You know very well fear is no stranger to me, and that you are taking unfair advantage. And Semyasi says, surely, but I had to be unfair. Meyer says, well, it deals with the following. Already for some time I have assumed that besides yourselves are still other extraterrestrials hunting along in our world, but having different wishes and hopes, each according to his own. These creatures could be strange to your race, at least some of them, while others might rise from your race itself. Semyasi says, yes, surely, but speak on. Meyer says, I can imagine that not all of the extraterrestrials who interfere in such concerns here on Earth have the best intentions for us, but where it is not evident as to why you allow them to continue, I think. It's a strange sentence. I don't know really what they were saying. Semyasi says, because each form of life is justified in its own existence and thinks and acts according to its own character and form, we are not allowed to interfere if not necessary for survival. Thus we are only allowed to be active in a way of teaching. But go on speaking. Meyer says, that explains your behavior, and I see it as logical. So I start from the assumption that certain strange to you forms of life from the widths of the universe are hunting along on our Earth and in cosmic space, and possibly trying to influence other forms of life in different ways. On the other hand, I also assume that there are one or several groups of descendants of your ancient race who have not yet returned to you, and in consequence, still live according to the ancient forms and still influence many forms of life, as well as the earth humans according to that factum. Never heard of that word before, factum. And appear as messengers of a M.E. I don't know what that means. It is evident to me that concerning this you have not told me the whole truth, as we have talked about these things several times before this. Boy, this is really bold. He's going to create a problem with her. Sannyasi says, I have never told you anything but the truth. Meyer says, then let me explain it another way. About this whole matter that you have told me, only half the truth, and only half explained that. Sannyasi says, your explanation is true. Meyer says, very kind of you, but why haven't you told me all? Sannyasi says, the time has not been mature for that. In your assumption you are right, because there are other creatures in Earth space than ours alone. There are as well some splinter groups of our own ancient race who came here as well as visiting other worlds, and they still live according to older ways. They try to influence life forms, especially Earth humans, according to their manner. As their ancestors appeared like gods, so also do some of these. Concerning the above, Meyer further explained, for our benefit, that there is an important doctrine for peace and survival within the creation. No single creature is given primitive dominance or paramount authority over any other, though Earthman chooses to elect himself to this position, and they all exist equally within the vast creation. Whenever anyone arrogates superiority to himself and sets out to carry a stick or sets himself up as an authority, he must be aware that there is always another with a bigger stick. Each creature within the creation goes its own way in evolution and is allowed free rein unless and until it becomes dangerous and a menace to any other. One does not interfere with another without just cause. Thus many different UFO entities may come and go without specific interference, as long as they observe the natural law of the creation. Meyer explained that there are always backsliders and imperfections in every evolution that get stuck at certain levels for a time and are then passed up by the more progressive, but they too will in time catch up again. However, we do also have some human races evolved beyond us, but behind the Pleiadians, and some of them are Pleiadian laggards, here, observing, and some even attempting to impose their will on Earth humans. These are allowed their freedom to evolve, like all others, so long as they do not become a direct danger to life and being. Such, according to the Pleiadians, are the IHWH descendants, still coming here from their present refuge planets. On Wednesday, the 25th of June, 1975, at 2:37 in the afternoon, the 27th contact took place. Meyer was chastised for being late. Sannyasi says, today you are not in a hurry. I had to call you several times. Meyer was getting a little tired of the constant demands on his time, energy, and resources, and was beginning to feel like he had seen enough of the extraterrestrial woman and the spacecraft. He was being criticized by his friends for not producing more and for not getting them into contracts too, or at least where they could see more. And he was being criticized by the extraterrestrials for not meeting their objectives more rapidly and for failing to turn his friends into a more active support group. The newness of these exotic contacts had worn off, and he was really in no hurry to rush off to another call. Always long distances away, over difficult and trying routes, and usually in bad weather or very late at night, and sometimes both. Though this one was coming in mid-afternoon. He was babysitting the children at the time, and when his wife returned he did not respond. taking his camera and riding off on his moped, and he finally arrived at the site of the contact, not really expecting them to be there after so long a time, and not particularly caring whether they were or not. So Meyer says, "By regret, I couldn't simply go away, for my wife was not at home, so I had to watch the children." Semjase said, "Because of that, I had to call you for longer than an hour. Today I have a surprise for you." Semjase said they were there with 3 beam ships and that she had permission to take him on a first trip with them. This was reported in the preliminary investigation report. She had provided an empty seat in her ship and took Meyer aboard. He was able to photograph the other 2 ships as they were starting their departure on this unforgettable occasion. Wow, this sounds great. For greater events, Semjase had frequently arrived with additional protective craft which remained screened from sight. For the 3rd of April night demonstration when Meyer was injured, she had 4 protective craft which remained invisible to sight. It was because of this that she was able to safely land and treat Meyer's broken rib. Incidentally, she told him at that time that he had 2 other ribs that had been previously broken, which had not healed straight. Checking back later, he discovered that he may have broken ribs in something else, but having no opportunity to treat them at the time, allowing them to heal by themselves. Why can't she straighten out those crooked ribs? If they can heal them that fast, they could certainly make the bone flexible and then straighten them and then make it solid again. This completely unexpected and mind-blowing change of events turned Meyer around again, and he began to take more serious and even avid interest in these Pleiadian cosmonauts and their objectives. He began to rouse his friends to activity and purge the doubters from the inner group privileges. He began to take the tightened inner group more closely into his confidence, and as they became active helpers, he was allowed to share some inside information with them. Thus was formed the inner core of those who began to surround him. Soon of these were even singled out by name and given information, and sometimes even objects, to let them know that they were accepted by the extraterrestrials, and also to keep their personal interest up. I think you can be sure that if these people had money, that they would be in the inner circle as long as they were able to contribute. Now I understand why so many people were asked for money to have privy to this information, and they tried to commercialize it because they desperately needed money. And it created a lot of stress within the group. I'd like to know more about these 25 people that lived in this group. Randy Winters talks about them, but he doesn't talk about them individually, and he doesn't talk about their financial situation. The 28th contact was by thought transmission, with no face-to-face meeting to be recommunicated for record. The reception process was the same, however, as for that of the contact notes. In this process, however it is done, there is an interaction between the communicator and the receiver, and the transmission can be interrupted as in a conversation, and questions may be asked, with immediate answers provided. The reception is by automatic writing or typing at high speed without pauses or interruptions until the end of the thought being communicated at the time. That communicated received on Friday, the 27th of June 1975, at 10:47 in the morning, introduced another Pleiadian, a male whom Meyer was told he could call Quetzal. This Pleiadian man was described as the supervisor of the Pleiadian Earth base high in the Alps near the Italian and French borders. Oh, so that's who Quetzal was. He was the supervisor of a base. It was not far from Mount Blanc. A number of Pleiadian humans and occasionally intelligent human beings from other space-traveling races are specially conditioned to live on the surface of our planet here. They operate an array of monitoring equipment. Among other things, Quetzal laid down some rules about the contact notes which clearly we have been unable to follow. We are therefore in violation of their rules, and are in fact forbidden to publish these contact notes. It is easy to see that we cannot abide by their rules on publication of these notes, as we would be legally vulnerable in a number of ways. We have had to purge the names and certain data to be safe, and thereby are also guilty of publishing these notes out of context, which was also prohibited. We have done so anyway, as we have done at risk of being deprived of all further information. Had we not done this, you would know little of the Pleiadian contacts in Switzerland. But here is what Quetzal said. A further point must be made in respect to the contact notes. As we have seen, you finally trouble yourselves for the finishing of the contact notes for release. Here a factor comes to our attention, which is not our intention, as we have discussed in this respect formerly and very thoroughly. According to the view of some of your members, the reports should be elaborated and spread only partly, leaving all personal concerns, etc., out of the finished version. With that, we cannot agree from our side. Our decision continues, in consequence, that the reports shall be published according to the fixed words, letter by letter, exactly at hand. By that are as well included all personal affairs, which in consequence then are not to be left out. The reports are only worthy and complete when they are revealed word by word and contain all the facts. This is an objective based on very thorough deliberations and logic. All personal and other matters, which are not mentioned in the reports and are not admitted and should not be published, as these, since the beginning, were spared from the reports. All the present contact reports contain exactly the matters to be offered and explained to Earth humankind. We cannot accept any deletion of any facts, explanations, information, or other parts of the conversations. In this respect, all must be included, even if certain matters are undelightful for some persons. But this not only concerns some of your members, but as well ourselves, because we still make unrecognized mistakes. We expect now a recognition of the mentioned mistakes and their removal. It is not very delightful for us if we have to constantly trouble ourselves in this respect. Once we give an explanation or an order, then it should be enough. It should never happen that matters have to be repeated several times and discussed. In this respect, we also have ordered sannyasi to omit in the future any kinds of repetitions of a once explained factor. For what has once been explained and discussed needs no further explanations. I disagree with that philosophy. People don't always get it the first time. Sometimes you have to put it in a different form, say it a different way, a different time. Sometimes people are not concentrating, they don't pick it up. Continuing, this is not only time-consuming but illogical and superfluous. By no means do we try to exercise dictatorial measures or to force our will or our knowledge on any earth beings. We only have undertaken a self-imposed mission to transmit lessons of truth and some other things. Those who want to accept and acknowledge this may do so by their own decision, and one who wants to refuse may also do that. The acknowledging ones must be aware that quite defined principles are necessary to preserve order. Thus, special objectives and orders must be observed, as well as not omitting certain assistance expected of me. The group members around Meyer had sensibly decided to edit and leave out sensitive comments and all direct references to personalities mentioned in the notes before any release outside the group. Quetzal's position is that they, the Pleiadians, have already purged what they think should be left out before the contact notes were transmitted, and that they do not need purging anymore. That's a strange way of thinking. Some of those comments are damaging to certain personalities, and even libelous under our laws. So we have had to take exception to Quetzal's demand, and have edited and deleted as we considered appropriate. The 29th contact took place on Monday, the 7th of May, 1975, at 10:30 in the morning, and this was another of the face-to-face meetings. The first part of the discussion pertained to Carl Viet's visit. Apparently, he's a German UFO investigator. In an earlier contact, Meyer had asked for and been given the names of several recognized UFO contactees, whom the Pleiadians thought were deceivers. During the Veit visit, he mentioned these deceivers in good faith to Carl, trusting the allegations of the ETs. Some of them happened to be contactees whom Veit was quite convinced were legitimately real. As a matter of fact, we do agree with Carl on some of them. Now Meyer has decided to confront the Pleiadians over this matter. Meyer says, "On that I wanted to ask you a question too. The V's are convinced that some of the names you mentioned as deceivers are not guilty of such deceit. What do you say to that?" Semyasi, we have recorded your hours-long discussions, and I am informed about them quite thoroughly. But I also explained before that you would have a very troublesome position. This has come true, as you do know. This troublesome position will continue for you in the future as well. The more we have looked into different places, the more we find certain things against you in progress, and intrigues are being built up against you. From different quarters you have been for some time watched very thoroughly and very tightly controlled, while already some wicked-minded elements are also plotting intrigues against you. In consequence, be very careful in every respect. Evil tongues are accusing you of espionage for foreign powers, while others are accusing you of deceit by which they seek to prevent you from spreading the truth. These elements, on the one side, belong to religious circles, and on the other, a still secret organization desiring to suppress what you say. Certain lines in this respect are running to different secret alliances and confederations, as well as to officials in the military, and to certain individuals who feel menaced by what you say. Certain other elements are working against you, because if you are proven right, they could be accused of deceit. Meyer says, "You give me a fantastic outlook, Semyasi, but actually I have calculated with things like that." Semyasi says, "You had to because you do know these things from earlier times." As we got into this UFO investigation, we, the investigators, came under tight investigation by somebody else and began to notice many strange and unbelievable things happening. Our telephones were tapped. Our mail was intercepted, and we were followed. Total strangers made appointments with us, or simply intercepted us and warned us to back off. We were picked up by special agents and questioned. We were stopped in different countries en route to and from Switzerland, and were interrogated and sometimes given instructions by one service, and then another, and then again differently by another, leading us to believe that they were not in contact with each other. Every time we visited the Meyer farm, we noticed that a military strong point was set up on the hill overlooking the Meyer house, with a clear view right down into the family living room. We received threats by mail and by telephone, and were occasionally intimidated in person. Whenever we went to one or another of the contact sites, or photo sites where the UFO pictures were taken, we saw low-flying reconnaissance spotter craft pass over our heads, and we even photographed some of them. It was quite obvious that we were the ones being watched. Meyer continued to press his advantage. He says, "You mentioned something in the last meeting. You told me that I could once come with you to the Pleiades." Semyasi, "Surely, but this will only be a short part of a larger trip, because the aim, seen from Earth, is many light years distant. Meyer says, "My dear, this is fantastic. I only wanted to take photographs there. By regret, the last pictures have nearly all been about the travel to Saturn. Either they were overexposed or the film was just black." Semyasi says, "This unfortunately had to be expected because you may need for such cases special equipment." Meyer says, "Nevertheless, I will try again on the next trip. If just some of the pictures would be successful for me, even halfway, then I'm content." I wonder if these Pleiadians breathe oxygen. I wonder what is the right percentage of oxygen for them. And I wonder if the Earth was set up with that oxygen level, and if we have a common percentage of oxygen that's ideal for both the Pleiadians and the Earth humans. Semyasi says, "Besides this, there is a chance that we will take you up with us, again, on the next meeting for a further special flight. More, we also want to see whether you are able to make certain pictures, for we have produced in this aim a special apparatus." Meyer says, "What shall I photograph?" Semyasi says, "You will recognize this soon enough. But now my time is over again, for I still have to carry out different duties." On Tuesday, the 15th of July, 1975, at 9:46 a.m., one of the by now becoming familiar thought transmissions, the 30th contact, was received. This contact advised Meyer of and instructed him to prepare a longer absence for this proposed trip. Semyasi says, "I have received your different thoughts, but could not respond immediately, as my present task occupies me very much. And as I now take up contact with you today, it will be, for certain reasons, for only a short time. Prepare yourself to be ready in the early morning hours of the 17th of July, which is within 2 days. At a given time, I will call you then and take you from a suited location. You should equip yourself with sufficient film material, as this will be of some importance. Prepare yourself further to be absent for a longer time, because you will undertake a further flight which is not possible even to many space-traveling creatures. Within this universe are few forms of life able to overcome such great distances, because this is only possible through hyperspace. Where this has been made possible by advanced technical developments, the universe offers no limits. Also, space and time are no longer barriers, and so as well the barrier between universes can be negotiated. As you know from former times, so also are known time journeys for certain forms of life." Meyer asks, "Do you know these things?" Semyasi, "Surely, as asked, it is well known to me. But please do not interrupt me, because my time for this contact is very short. We will not be able to accomplish the coming travel in my small ship, as for such trips it is unsuited. We shall go over to a great space-fitted ship, so prepare for altogether at least 30 hours of your time to be absent, because this ship we will travel far outside the stars' formations known to. More also, you should have an opportunity to make some pictures, and possibly to view from a distance the ancient home planet of our human races." Oh. "Today it presents a peculiar sight, originating in the destruction of a great star. The destruction took place a very long time ago. Because of its unlike shape, this formation is called IHWHHATA. This name means, translated into your language, Eye of God. According to your astronomical catalogs, you find this Eye of God within the stars of Lyra, and you call it the Ring Nebula of Lyra, or H57. These are the concerns I had to report today. If now you still have a question, then I have a short time to answer." Meyer asks, "I feel myself placed into a kingdom of fantasy, Semyasi, but tell me, Where in the sky or heaven can I find this eye of God? Sannyasi: to do this you need a bigger telescope. Sannyasi later explained that their ancestors and ours descended from the refugees from that great sun system, some of whom fled to the Pleiades and other places in their escape from destruction. Meyer says, a pity in respect to the planned journey. I still have one question. When I count the distance in kilometers, what is the number? Sannyasi says it exceeds all your mathematical possibilities of calculation manyfold. Telling the number which I could give you, but only in my terms, would in consequence be absurd. Meyer says, but then a few hours will not be sufficient. Sannyasi says, you forget about the negation of time and space by hyperspace. And Meyer asks, dear me, then this will become just a short trip to the end of the universe, a travel into eternity, so to speak? And Sannyasi says, your thoughts are wrong, for we don't reach an end of the universe, for such an end does not exist. The author says, apparently time and space as we understand them in our material universe are physical properties of our material continuum, which may be bypassed by raising the vibrations of the field with any protective field to a frequency above the physical chemical realm, where the laws and properties of the material world no longer constrain matter, and all in the field responds to the new laws simultaneously, such as for spirit. The big day, the 31st contact, was on Thursday, the 17th of July, 1975, when the Pleiadians picked up Meyer at a very carefully selected location at 10:14 a.m. for this 31st contact with the extraterrestrials in less than 6 months. Edward J. Meyer had made his plans as required, allowing for an absence of over 30 hours. He got up early and completed his preparations. He loaded his bike and waited for the signal. When it came and the rendezvous point was identified, he bid farewell to his family and started out for the remote and very inaccessible location, so difficult to negotiate, even with his moped, that it would certainly discourage followers. Arriving at the signified location, he unloaded the equipment he would carry and carefully hid his vehicle against accidental discovery. Shortly after this, the spacecraft arrived, and he was greeted by the now quite familiar extraterrestrial woman. He looked at his watch. It was 10:14, and he was immediately taken into the ship along with his equipment brought for the trip. They rose into the ship in a beam of energy, and it took right off on the greatest event in Meyer's entire life. After that trip, he was brought back to the same spot, retrieved his moped, still undisturbed, and rode all the way home in wonder and contemplation. He was totally exhausted and went right to bed and slept. After resting from the strain of all the excitement, Meyer got up, washed his face, and went out and settled himself at his desk in the little shed to receive the transmission. Suddenly he was tuned in, and the transmission was received as before, rapidly, continuously, with no repeats and no stopping for corrections, in one long, uninterrupted run until the first transmission was complete. He had filled scores of pages. Then he was allowed to rest for a day, and another segment came through the same way. This was repeated a number of times until the full account had been received and documented there on paper. Some of this contact had already been reported in the preliminary investigation report. More will be reported in a greater presentation of the Pleiadian messages at a future time. For our purpose now, we shall abstract from the reports a little more of the time aboard the great spacer mother ship. End of chapter 4. Yay, it's over! I'm reading from the book UFO Contact from the Pleiades by Wendell Stevens, and this is chapter 5, Aboard the Mothership. The first part of the spectacular interplanetary space trip was summarized in 12 pages of Chapter 7 of the preliminary investigation report and will not be repeated here. It may be well, however, to briefly summarize that coverage and make a few corrections to the information available to us at that time. We had recorded several descriptions covering various parts of the trip, but did not actually have all the contact notes in our possession and translated at that time. Those notes, obtained and translated later, showed that upon receiving confirmation of the trip for that morning and the location of the rendezvous site, Meyer set out, driving his already loaded moped, being telepathically guided over less crowded route sections, and he arrived on scene at about 9:30, that would be in the morning. By the time he had unloaded his bike and had safely hidden it from accidental discovery, it was after 10 in the morning. He readied his equipment for quick pickup as he waited, and the spacecraft showed up a few minutes after that, and he was taken aboard. He turned and took pictures of his departure before the iris-like opening in the bottom of the ship was closed. They had brought a special camera screen. The first part of that trip was to Venus to check on something, where Meyer took more photos. Here we find that Meyer always took for windows that which was described as multi-purpose sensors. They were sometimes transparent, but they changed colors and clarity of their transparency under different conditions, sometimes even becoming opaque. For that reason, the travelers themselves relied on primarily their 3D viewing screens for sight. It was a special adaptation of this technology within a portable unit that had the illumination adjustment and viewing controls on it, including zoom and viewing frequency control. This unit was similar to the ship's normal viewing screens, which picked up a much wider range of frequencies than our visual range. But this device had been modified to step down to our visible range so that Meyer's camera could record them in our sight frequencies in the colors we can sense. Well, that makes me curious. How do the Pleiadians' eyes compare to ours? Do they have a broader range? Did they genetically modify to get a broader range so they can see ultraviolet and infrared? It sounds like they accommodated him on this flight. Continuing, this also must have given the extraterrestrials control over all that Meyer saw and photographed off the imaging screen of this device. Well, he seems to be suspicious of their motives. The way that's written, I don't know. They penetrated the Venus cloud layer and broke out underneath at what Semjase said was about 40 kilometers. Wow! Imagine being 40 kilometers from Venus. The heat! There was clear visibility underneath, and Meyer could see the surface of the planet very clearly, and described a cratered surface with a medium-high range of mountains to the right and wide plain to the left. He said he saw no mountains in the polar area. Surprisingly, the Astronomy magazine for August 1976 described almost the same thing from surroundings later made by space probes. These magazine pictures arrived more than 1 year after Meyer's trip. Well, where are Meyer's pictures of Venus? I don't remember ever seeing any. Did I miss them, or do they not exist? He brought his camera, he took pictures. Where are the pictures? Why didn't the Pleiadians have cameras of their own, far advanced of ours? If they record every word spoken, how come they can't record every frame that was ever seen on this trip to Venus or any other place? Next paragraph. The spacecraft approached Mercury, and Meyer took a picture of it through the viewing instrument. After that, they checked on something on one of the satellites of Saturn and returned to Earth in time to observe the Apollo-Soyuz space docking that day at around 4:30 in the afternoon by Meyer's watch. Not bad for one day. I wish to God I was Billy Meyer. Again, Meyer shot pictures of the space docking using the same special viewing screen provided. So he watches it From space? I thought they got back and he watched it on television. He's watching this from space? I wonder what NASA thought of that. Get out of the picture. In the ship's screens, Meyer could see other spacecraft in the vicinity. Other spacecraft in the vicinity there, which did not show up on his special screen. When he asked about this, the ET, he calls it an ET, the Pleiadian Semyasi said that those other craft were surrounded by energy fields that could only be picked up on special scanners, which his device did not have access to. I don't get it. So he's looking out a window of some kind, and he sees spacecraft. And she tells them that he's not able to see that on his device. So he has a separate device for seeing these things, and it's not showing up there. But he looks out the window, and the sensors pick it up. Geez, there could be thousands of ships around Earth, and we wouldn't even know it. Our science wouldn't even know it. They're that advanced. After that, they proceeded to Gross Rama, which means Great Spacer, mothership in distant space. Well, I'd like to know where that's parked. It was a huge pyramidal craft with a great central sphere, 10.6 miles in diameter, 17 kilometers approximately, with 3 auxiliary spheres, nearly 4 miles in diameter each, arranged in a triangle on extended legs to one side of the central sphere. What kind of stresses are on those metals? Wow. One was an agricultural model, one was basic materials generator, and the third was a technological manufacturing facility which produced all the finished consumer goods required by the community and equipment. The central sphere was the living center for 144,000 people. I want to go there. I want to read about that. Geez, why do they have to call a press conference and show the ships flying? Just give us a video of this great spacer, Gross Rama, mothership. I must confess that when the 144,000 figure was given to me initially, I was told that it was a rounded figure. It sounded too mystical to me at the time, so I rounded it to 143,000 inhabitants in my preliminary investigation report. That was very stupid. What's the difference? My God, it isn't even 1%. It's about 0.75%. Now I see why Quetzal told him, don't modify anything, because you're putting out wrong information. There are 144,000 people on this ship. This completely self-contained ship that manufactures all the goods they need, and it produces all the food that they need. Now he admits, that was a mistake on my part, and I take full responsibility for my error. Okay, fine. Forgiven. Actually, as the population is not static, it could have easily has been up to 145,000 also, and still been as accurate as the given 144,000 figure. Now, I wonder how and why their population fluctuates. I would guess death and birth, and I wonder if they die of any kind of disease or accident. Do they have accidents and die? If so, do they know how to pull a soul into another being? Can they clone a human being, one of their people, and put a soul in that? If somebody loses their body, do they replace it with a new one? Do they have all the acids in the brain so they can reproduce that person? Give him back all his memory? I wonder. Now he wants to belabor this issue a little bit more. What if the base figure is correct? And what if the real source of the mystical figure quoted, and what if that is the real source of the mystical figure quoted in the Christian Bible? Well, I'm not familiar with what he's alluding to here. Apparently, the Bible says something about 144,000 people living on a spaceship. Was the Bible influenced by the Pleiadians? I believe it was, because Semyasi said, in the beginning there was thought, and we put down light. and she said we screwed that part up. We know that Jesus was half Pleiadian. His father was Gabriel. His stepfather, Joseph, knew that and married Mary anyway. Next paragraph. The hangar deck alone, in the lower levels of the Big Mother ship, it's a Big Mother, covered square miles of area, and Meyer saw hundreds, perhaps even thousands, an uncountable number of ships of many sizes and types in there. Uncountable number. Wow. When he asked what they did with so many ships, he was told that they may have as many as 500 of those ships out on missions at any given time, in our solar system and elsewhere. Clearly, this was a stupendous operation and could have been in existence for 2,000 years. We don't know how long the Pleiadians have had a mother ship in this solar system. This one's docked at Saturn. Now, I recall the Baavians had a spaceship in Saturn, and Riley Martin has been there and tells about it. But he's charging admission now to reveal anything that he knows or has experienced. I have not been able to find any books written by him, but there were a lot of interviews. I wonder who else is in the Saturn area. Now, the Baavians said they were there because they could get all the materials they needed from the rings. If they needed a particular metal, it was there. Don't forget, Saturn is a gigantic planet. Much, much larger than Earth. I believe it's number 2. I think Jupiter's the big one. It's so big that it's a sun. It puts out more light than it absorbs, which makes it a sun, not a planet. They were taken in a transport vehicle inside the Great Spacer to a control center where Meyer was introduced to Semyasi's father, Ptah. See, I told you that was her father, who did not speak the German language and used a translating device to communicate with Meyer. Ptah said the Great Spacer was already moving toward their transmit position and showed Mr. Meyer, some of the control instruments. That is where we left off in the preliminary report, and I want to tell the viewer that I tried to find that report and I could not find it anywhere. I thought it was pretty interesting that they had 12 pages in chapter 7 on this, and I find the time on this ship to be extremely interesting. And I want to be Billy Meyer so much. You have no idea. I want to go to these other planets in our solar system. I want to go to other galaxies. I want to see other civilizations. And so I looked for that preliminary report, and I will find it eventually. And when I get it, I promise I'll read it to you. And if you send me a message, if they haven't killed me yet, I will read it for you. Because I like to read, and as long as you like to hear stories, we got a deal. Let's continue now with the dialogue. So, Semyasi has a father named Ptah, and she introduces Billy Meyer to her father. I think that means that they're going to get married when you bring home your boyfriend to meet your parents. Hey, where's the mother? Well, anyway. So, daughter and father are on a mission together. Now, how did that happen? Aren't you curious about that? And now Meyer is seated in his little lean-to den. What does that mean? And he has made himself ready for reception. Semyasi greets him. Today is your great day, Meyer says. After all you have told me, I feel the same way. Semyasi says, you had to think about what would be expected. But now I must explain for this time that you will have to keep silence about certain concerns. At a later time, I will be able to allow you to tell about the experience. For that, I will leave out of the transmission of the report certain things of which you may not speak. But come now, first we make a journey through your solar system. Cool. We go to the ship and are lifted up inside the transport beam. And only a few seconds after this, the ship floats up high, and I shoot from about 50 meters height some dia pictures, that probably means motion pictures, of the environment of the departure point. I take the pictures partly from straight above and partly from the side. I can take these pictures still through the entrance hatch as we climb very slowly higher. After shooting the pictures, Samyasi closes the hatch, and within seconds the ship rushes up to several kilometers high without my noticing any pressure or other change. Everything is just like I was standing on solid ground on the earth. Different sudden alternations of the course produced no bodily effect, though I can see through the windows aboard that at different times we shoot along in the craziest movements, like a great pendulum. Now, Meyer says it's just like walking on solid ground on the earth, so I wonder, what is the gravity on their home planet or their spaceship? Do they adjust it for each person? Did they modify Earth so that Earth's gravity would be the same as their planet when we were placed here, or whatever brought us here? It's obvious that we are aliens, and we are just like the Pleiadians. They look identical to us. I don't know much about their culture, but I have many, many questions, and I know that Billy Meyer had many questions too. The last paragraph here, it was from those transmissions and subsequent discussions that we abstracted the part of this trip published in our preliminary report. As soon as the trip got underway, Meyer busied himself examining in detail the special device the ETs had provided for his photographing efforts. Such accommodations. How much is one night in this hotel? This viewing screen looks to me like clear glass, through which everything outside can be observed. Only I can see that this whole viewing screen is very finely scanned, sharpened image, similar to laser-scanned photographs. Amazing. The size of the screen was about 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, and since 1 centimeter is 2.54 inches, I think that's about 20 inches by 20 inches. While the color radiation device is installed inside the side of it and recessed, and thus I could not examine its inner workings. Besides this device, there were many most different apparatus of all kind, all around the cockpit room, installed within a circular control console and in the walls. These strange appearing apparatus, should be apparati, which I had already seen on the first flight, quite evidently serve for the guiding and controlling of the beam ship, while evidently so serving as well for exploration devices, distance meters, radiation control means, and other things, and play an important role in the operation of the flight machine. I would love to see some photographs of the interior of this ship. All of the viewing and picture display screens differ basically from all other known to me apparatus of the same character of Earth origin. All of the forms, symbols, and figures in these screens were displayed in beautiful and often fantastic colors and arrays, and were displayed in depth, contrary to the known to me Earth display or picture screens, which in practice are only able to show displays of signs and pictures by foreground, flat two-dimensional no-depth images, while these screens here showed everything in vivid three-dimensional effect. Unbelievable. Like they were materially real. Wow. And not only generated by impulses. We must remember that this was all taking place in 1975, before we had multicolor liquid crystal displays and three-dimensional television. So the obvious question here is, do they see in the same wavelength that we see? And why haven't they modified their ability to see in a broader range? Because there are bugs who can see in the infrared. That's how mosquitoes find you. They're looking for the right temperature, and then they come and bite. Meyer's first impressions of the huge mothership included their approach and entrance into it through an opened port, the fantastically large parking bay, and the many hundreds of other ships seen, some being worked by part mechanical, part organic, human-like creatures evidently used in labor operations. The transparent metal walls, The floating shuttle transport cars used inside the huge sphere, etc., were all described in the preliminary report, up through the introduction to Semyasi's father. They are now en route to the transmit position, which Ptah says will take about 30 minutes of our time. Ptah and Semyasi turn themselves to the instruments at a horseshoe-shaped formation. Small light bodies illuminate, and a dark picture screen comes alive. Strange forms and symbols appear on it. Other imaging displays are active. Then Meyer hears a tone, a very soft and soothing singing of metal. He looks up at the transparent cupola and saw the scene wash away in a whitish, milky veil. This only lasted a very short moment, and suddenly could see stars again. He felt tranquility inside him. Then he heard Semyasi's voice, and wondered about this as Ptah had asked for silence. He wondered if something had gone wrong to delay the transmission. It had already been accomplished for the first hyperleap of a number that they would undertake in the next few hours. I presume that word is accomplished. We don't have a word, A-C-C-L-I-S-H-E-D. Before the great spacer reached its transit position, Semyasi had sent one of the robotoid creatures back to her beam ship in the hangar bay to bring the special imaging device to the control room for Meyer to use in an effort to take pictures outside the ship. We now turned to him here and suggested he try. Semyasi says, if you want, you can try some photographs here, but whether they will succeed I cannot estimate. By regret, we do not know whether Earth cameras can take pictures through the cupola, but this we will know after you have developed your films. We don't say it like that. We say film. Some foreigners say film. If you like, we can use the equipment brought from my beam ship. Meyer says, I will be thankful for the instrument, Semyasi, for with that it will certainly succeed. But what is the matter? Is there no success with the transmission? Semyasi says, haven't you noticed? Meyer says, I have, but I can't explain. Semyasi says, then you need only to look out the cupola into space. Now what do you see there? Meyer says, girl, there are completely other formations of stars that I know from Earth. Of course, I know only a few by sight, but I see none that I can recognize. Why is that? Well, Meyer, maybe you changed position, huh? Semyasi says, we have made the first hyperleap. Oh, I gotta know how that's done. My God, how do they program the ship to go and what direction? What do? Set coordinates? You're gonna say, I want to go 3 light years in this direction, and I want to go 2 light years in that direction? How does it work? Meyer says, this man alive, dear, from that, I have no idea how to say that. Where are we now then? And Semyasi says, you are about 500 light years from your home world. 500 light years! In the blink of an eye. How did they do that? God, this universe is fascinating. There, look there above. That formation of stars there, that is our home world. These are the Pleiades. We are only 211 million kilometers from the nearest star. Sounds close. Unfortunately, we cannot arrive closer because we need a safe distance to be able to transit again. Perhaps you can succeed, nevertheless, in getting some pictures with the apparatus, which has already been brought. She travels 500 light years in the blink of an eye, the snap of a finger? I gotta get me one of those. Coming from somewhere, an android appears, bringing the photographic device. Very cleverly, it assembles it inside a frame and places it in order. Oh, we gotta get some of these. They're turning us into slaves. We could have androids doing this work. Suddenly the thing speaks to me. And once more I am flattered, although I understand not a word. Semyasi quickly enlightens me. Semyasi says, it wishes you a good success. Meyer says, but that is impossible. Can this thing think and act independently? That would be crazy. Ptah says, but nevertheless it does. Wow. That's our future. Combining a mechanized and biological entity all into one and having it do work for you. Now you know why I like reading books like this. I want to meet her. I want to meet Ptah. I want to go on one of these trips. And I want to escape the IRS and all the other taxation governments. I am not a slave. Sannyasi says its whole bodily construction is half organic and it's half brain chemical. So they injected acids into the brain of this thing and made it intelligent. But it has no soul? Ptah says, it is real and highly developed. You will understand this better after a short time when it is more normal for you. I don't know why they capitalized more. It is only the newness that makes it strange. But take care now about the photos, because the next leap is being prepared. Wow, we're in the Pleiades. Imagine. I follow the suggestion and hope the pictures come out. I keep thinking about Ptah's words. He is correct. As the strange phenomena of the transparent metal in the space capsules, and the same with the hangar walls, and now the dome here in the control center already do not seem so strange. The same with the photographic apparatus and the viewing screens, and the whole control center and instruments. Ptah is right, it's only a matter of familiarity. Ptah, you are in thoughts, my friend. Watch the stars. In 9 seconds, we will start the next jump. Ho-ho! 10, 9, 8, 7. Meyer asked about a symbol, form of writing, or recording that he observed aboard the ship, and asked how old it was and when did it originate. Sannyasi says, that is easy to explain. These letters we are using here are only 11,000 years old. And we had taken them over at that time from our ancestors who lived on Earth. Earth? Our older letters in script form was much more complex, while this here now is much easier. It sounds like the Chinese language. They have the formal and then they have the simplified. Traditional and simplified, I think they call it. This script form was developed by different of our scientists on Earth who used for a pattern the scene from Earth star formations. They connected certain star pictures by lines, and the result evolved into these forms. As our script consists of small circles and lines, the circles represent stars, and the lines just connect them. This is a surprising statement because a similar description was given to New Englander John B. Newbrough, hey bro, in a remarkable way by automatic writing in a session at 2 o'clock in the morning in the dark in the basement of his home. In 1881, in which he was given this symbol form and was told that it was the predecessor of all written forms on Earth today, and was derived by the Magi from observations of the star formations in the sky. Well, I'm confused now. John B. Newbrough, 1881? Okay, I've looked him up, and this guy, John B. Newbrough, was born in 1828, so that date of 1881 is real. It's not a typo. Newbrough became a doctor and didn't like it, so he became a dentist instead. He got gold fever and went to California, found gold, and made a small fortune. Then he went to Australia and multiplied his nest egg. Then some aliens told him to buy a typewriter, and he did. And they telepathically sent him a book called OASP, which took a year to write, even with automatic typing. Newbrough set up a community called Shalom, S-H-A-L-A-M, but it failed when he died of pneumonia. It sounds interesting. If Wendell Stevens thought it was important and has mentioned it several times, I think I should read the book anyway. And if I really like the book and think it's interesting, I'll read it to you. I've downloaded the page, and I'll put that on a back burner for now. Let's go back to what we're doing. He was also given at that time a table of the existing languages derived from this form. This was said to be the ancient writing of the gods, and was used as sacred writing by the Magi. This symbol form was used in making magic talismans in the distant past, and in the signs of the great alchemists, the first scientists of history. It was also said to be the secret holy writing of King Solomon, recognized today as the father of certain mystic sects, and it is still used in secret rites in some societies. Newbro published his transmissions in an old American work entitled OHASP. No, that's not correct. It's OASP. O-A-H-S-P-E. Well, there's two different spellings, and one of them is probably right, and the other one is probably wrong. But O-A-H-S-P-E is what I just read, and I doubt that O-H-A-S-P-E is correct. But it was first printed in 1882. Meyer, that's interesting, and your explanation suffices for me in that this script is no more known on the earth. Semyasi says, it has only been forgotten, but was in use many centuries ago, during which it was often changed in detail. Still, some few scripts of Earth humans today are simply altered forms of these shapes that have been made into letters which trace back to our old symbols. Then the realization hits Meyer, and he says, this is astonishing. Then the script on Earth was not developed by Earthmen themselves. Semyasi says, if you speak of the earth-bound forefathers of your human races, and not of the heavenly ancestors, then you are correct. It was first brought by the sons of heaven, who were the ones responsible for the re-emergence of Earth humans from savagery. They were getting ready for the next hyperleap, a big one, and Meyer wished he could record the sensations of the event so he could write them down in detail later. Semyasi says that's not difficult. The booths which you can see there beside the picture screens are equipped with all necessary means to store up feelings and thoughts. Amazing. Amazing. The thought impulses received are stored in a special computer and can later, as may be desired, be repeated word for word from the recording. The helmet, shapeable and adaptable in size, which you see there, is equipped with very fine sondes, whatever that is, and is as well covered by a special fine-meshed net of sondes, which pick up every kind of energy and transforms it into impulses, which are then transmitted to the computer, where they are registered and stored. Well, it sounds simple enough. The energy of thoughts and feelings is measured in very high values and can be received only through those instruments. The energies of feelings and thoughts exist only in very high frequency fields, or hyperfrequencies. To now be able to register your thoughts and feelings, it is necessary for you to place yourself into the chair and lay the head under the helmet cap, which then will adapt itself automatically to your head. Meyer says, that's all I have to do? Semyasi says, no, that is not all. But now place yourself in the booth. The great journey starts in 23 seconds. Ooh. Meyer, at your service, Miss General. As Semyasi explained to me, I quickly sit down inside of one of those 3 booths in the extremely comfortable chair. I'd like to know how that's made. And how come our bodies fit into those chairs just like their bodies? Are we that close in design? As soon as I have seated myself, the peculiar helmet moves over my head and sinks down silently. It is big enough that it closes around my whole head and only leaves my face open. Thus I can see and watch everything. But the helmet is not touching my head, only lying close around it, keeping about 1.5 centimeters distance to my skull, as I can see when I place my forefinger between the helmet and my head, or my heed. No, it's a misprint. Now I'm tense and expectant, for I wonder what is going to happen. Ptah and Semyasi manipulate the apparatus. It takes two of them? With that hyperleap over, Meyer asks, "Where are we now?" And he recognizes nothing familiar outside. Semyasi and Ptah say, "Have reached our goal." Meyer asks, "Better explain to me now, just what exactly are we actually going to do here?" Semyasi has said to me that she would have to execute here a special task. Semyasi says, "Just let yourself be surprised, my dear friend. After about 10 minutes you will understand all, and surely as well will be delighted." Meyer says, "Well, as I see it, we are moving through space. Only in front of us I see a star, which is getting bigger and bigger, and far behind that I can see 5 small blue points. What kind of a star is that? What are the blue points?" Ptah says, "That is Kaltos, the last point in this space. Being 2 times as large as your home system, it has a greater luminosity. The blue points visible beyond are also stars. They are self-radiant blue stars which generate very intense light. You may not be able to see with the naked eye, but there are not 5 of those, but 11 stars. If you want, you may of course take pictures of them." Meyer says, "Yes, I will, and get the pictures directly through the cupola. I'll alternate a little, taking some through your device, and then I will just take pictures through the cupola. That way I can later see which photographs come out better. I wonder which will." Okay, now they have an inserted comment. Kaltos, this remote and insignificant small system, as solar systems go, offers us some measure of comparison between our own solar system and that of the home world of Semyasi. Kaltos is twice the size of our system and has 11 sub-suns, big planets like Jupiter, each with a system of cold body satellites or planets. Semyasi's home planet's parent sun, the dim violet companion to Tegeta, as seen from Earth, is about the size and mass of our own sun and 24 times as bright. Ouch! Talk about sunburn. All I can say is Tegeta must be located 24 times as far away, or whatever the math is. Not sure how that would work out. I wouldn't want to be 93 million miles away from that sun. Ooh, you get cooked. Our solar system had 4 of what the Pleiadians call sub-suns: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune for its size. Kaltos, twice as big, has 11 sub-suns. So we have 4, they have 11, and they're twice the size. Thus, it is not unusual for a solar body about these sizes to have sub-sun systems with their own cold body or satellite systems. By simple analogy, it is entirely possible for Semyasi's planet's parent sun to have a number of sub-suns, and her home planet Era, with other cold bodies, orbits one of the sub-suns, one of 3 inhabited planets there known to Semyasi's group. So what they're telling us is Jupiter is a sun because it gives off more light than it takes in, and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune must be the same, I'm surmising, and that they live on something like Io or Ganymede, which are the moons of Jupiter. Now they're classifying Jupiter as a sun, a sub-sun, because it gives off more light, and then that would make Io and Ganymede planets. Interesting. But by what this says, the home planet Era orbits a sub-sun. So that's a moon of a giant planet in our terminology and thinking. Next paragraph. If ours has allowed development of rational intelligence and a technological race like our comparatively primitive one, how much more likely that such a one could be coming here from the Pleiades or anywhere else? If we grant the pan-systemic theory of migration of species, advocated by some schools of UFO philosophy, we certainly find abundant evidence of it in the literature on UFO contacts in recent years. Those Pleiadians visiting Switzerland have told their contactee that this is exactly how some of our Earth humanity got here in the first place. And they told him in the next moment that those same ancestors of ours, and of themselves as well, went to many other places in our visible universe, settled, and produced new societies with new technologies, some of which are also free traveling in space, some of those even finding their way to our solar system here. No wonder our great mythologies, in all societies on all continents of this planet, feature Pleiadian visitors, among others so prominently in their lore. There are, however, a great many others as well. Some of them, like the beings from Reticulum, have been repeatedly mentioned by the visitors who claim they come from the Pleiades. And there are a great many more, perhaps even unknown to the Pleiadians, visiting here. It comes as no surprise then that Kaltos, another small sun like ours, has a number of sub-suns and planets in its solar system. What does seem surprising is that Kaltos was pointed out as one similar solar system having no rational creatures evolving on its planets at this time, as though that were a noteworthy point to remember for some reason. Perhaps rational life is more widespread than we ever imagined up to now. Continuing the conversation between Meyer, Semyasi, and Ptah. Ptah says, "That's up to you. You may do as you prefer." Meyer, "Thanks. But what about the blue stars over there? How big are they? And is there any life on them?" Ptah says, "They are no bigger than your home world. Although this kind of star is normally 5 to 6 times as big, they are as inhospitable and hostile to life as the great planets of your solar system, such as Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus." "Well, John Lear, you said there was life on all the planets in our solar system." Ptah says, "Not true." Maybe John Lear meant that in the case of Jupiter, for example, there's life on Io and Ganymede, because I'm pretty sure that's correct. I'm pretty sure a gaseous planet like Jupiter has no life, as we know it. And I don't think that we know all the different types of life, for sure. There ought to be some energy creatures, because the universe is pure energy, and matter is energy that's been slowed down. And if all of this came from thought, you can be sure that the varieties are unlimited. That I feel pretty sure about. Let's continue. Ptah is speaking, and he's talking about our gigantic planets like Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. The gravity alone makes life very rarely possible on these stars. Now these are planets, but they're gaseous planets, and the Pleiadians call them stars. That's like calling Jupiter a star. And not even any spiritual forms of life, there's your clue, are at home on them. That tells you that there are spiritual forms of life out there. They don't have a body. They're not physical creatures like us. He says, and in the few exceptions, the existing creatures are very small, not exceeding a height or size of 70 centimeters. Now, that's about 3 feet, 2.54 centimeters per inch. And it looks like he's got about 30. So that's 2.5 feet, probably. Rough math. The gravity of such stars, he's calling them stars, they're actually planets. The gravity of such stars would damage them if they were growing any larger. Of course, this is different for each star or planet, while the atmosphere itself plays no role, because different forms of life are accommodated to having different atmospheres. So not all creatures breathe oxygen like ourselves and the Earth humans. Now, I had the question earlier, do they breathe oxygen like we do? And the answer is now yes, confirmed by Ptah. Meyer says, but it is said that very great planets or stars may be inhabited too, by accordingly greater forms of life, if there is life at all on them. I think this is the comment that makes Ptah angry. He doesn't say he's angry. I can just tell by his tone. Now let me read that again. Meyer says, but it is said that very great planets or stars may be inhabited too by accordingly greater forms of life, if there is life at all on them. Well, that's not the one that made him mad. Ptah says, so it happens only in certain well-defined circumstances. About this, the science of Earth is in error. If life so existed on your planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, then the forms of life would have to be semi-material only, etheric, and very small. This is not the case that greatness fosters greatness. For this special case, greatness can only be conquered by smallness. So in other words, the bigger the planet with more gravity, the smaller the beings have to be. That greatness can only be conquered by smallness, but only if of extraordinarily stable form. On your planets Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, great forms of life would never be able to survive. Wow, that's quite a statement. But as you know, no such creatures are at home on these planets, neither material nor spiritual. Meyer says, I was told about this matter, and also was shown at the place and location myself, where I also noticed that these called planets are not really planets. I may appear stupid when I ask a question about the stars, but I have been shown the difference between stars and planets, and surely this will be of interest to other human beings too. Will you thus explain the difference between stars and planets? Ptah says that is not difficult and easily explained. Planets are cosmic bodies which have practically no light of their own, and which get their light by a conversion of their sun's radiation falling on them. Stars are cosmic bodies which have their own force of radiation. Notice that word ME there in this case means own, O-W-N, which have their own force of radiation and which generates light from their own radiation. Both are inhabitable by creatures of sorts, stars as well as planets, if atmospherics and other circumstances permit it. This is the one that makes him mad. Meyer says, I see, and what about the suns? Are they perhaps only the outside solar formations, while inside may exist inhabitable planets? Ptah says, how made you come by this question? In other words, where did you get this crazy idea? And Meyer embarrassingly says, oh, I have read about it in books about these matters. A man by the name of Jacob Lorber has written decades or even centuries ago, shows you what era he came from, centuries ago, some about such things. I don't know what me means in this sentence. I think it probably means and moreover has also written about Saturn and other planets, which with Samyasi I have now seen for myself when Samyasi brought me to these planets and I was able to explore them with her help. Now remember his question. He asks about other suns and perhaps the outside solar formations while inside may exist inhabitable planets. And Ptah asks him, where did you get this idea? And he says, Jacob Lorber, who wrote it centuries ago. Ptah says, I understand. Unfortunately, there exist on Earth many humans who write such kinds of books and other literature. In other words, it's garbage. As you can see, these are the products of fantasy. Also, the fantasy interpretation with respect to livability on your sun, as no sun is like such statements. And Meyer says, yes, okay, I thought so. Give me a break. If you thought so, why did you ask the question? All right. He's trying to save face. Last paragraph. It was at this point that the Pleiadian ship effected a rendezvous with another great space mothership of the Dal universe, where meetings were held between two societies and where Meyer, to his great surprise, was able to meet Ascot again after 10 years. Wow. A reunion after 10 years. That was his surprise. Remember, there was a surprise that he was going to get? He went over to the Dal ship with Semyasi in her small craft, and they were taken inside. Woo, this is good. She offers her hand, and then later she offers him an arm. You'll understand what I mean later. Okay, so he sees Ascot after 10 years, and the emotion is overwhelming. He was almost overcome with excitement and emotion, he thought. Man alive, there she stands. There stands Ascot, and she smiles. I just can't speak. A confounded block is in my throat. Now Ascot walks towards me, wordless and smiling, and now she touches my hand, squeezes it, and draws me toward her. Dear me, is this real? Am I not dreaming? Oh, girl. Billy Meyer's funny. He says, girl. Ascot says, you really are not dreaming. Be very welcome with us. It is a delight and honor to greet you here. I see that a change has happened. I'm sorry. He lost his arm in 1965 in India on a bus ride. So she's going to offer him an arm that's half organic, and he turns it down. And I believe the reason is because he had to adjust to not having that arm, and it was extremely difficult. And to me, the best comparison is like going back to an ex-girlfriend or an ex-wife. Once you split, you go through the emotion of separation, and you adjust to it. And the last thing in the world you want is to go back to an ex-girlfriend or ex-wife. That's the way I feel. Some guys make friends out of them, and they continue the friendship their whole life. I cannot talk to them or see them. I don't want to hear anything about them. I throw away everything I had about them. And I think that's what happened here. He comes up with all kinds of crazy excuses for not accepting that arm. She should have told him, wear it for an hour and tell me if you can live without it. Because this thing is going to be wired into his brain. It's going to be half organic and half machine. He could squeeze a tree, crush a tree with his bare hand. I think it would be very useful. And I think that he just went through an emotional thing with that arm when he lost it, and he had to accept it. When he finally adjusted, and now he's adjusted, he doesn't want to go back to having the arm. So watch and see if you agree. Meyer says, you mean my arm? Give me a break. Jeez. Ascot says, yes. Meyer says, do know that I have already accommodated myself to it. You see, there's the first clue. I have already accommodated myself to it long ago. And I can't even imagine anymore a life with two arms for me. I have forgotten that. In other words, he made the adjustment. And Ascot says, if you say so, then it must be. But why don't you wear a helping device? That word me now means why. But why don't you wear a helping device? Now he starts with the excuses. First excuse, Meyer says, on Earth, unfortunately, these things are still very primitive. Now, how do you translate that? The truth is, he cannot afford one. He's using all his money to develop film. So he doesn't have any extra money to buy a prosthesis. Ascot says, I could have a device produced for you which would fully substitute for your arm a half-organic apparatus. Now that is a gift. I don't think they would charge him anything for it. They're not going to charge him an arm and a leg for it. He gets a free arm, and it's half organic. I don't know how the organic part stays alive. Does it use his blood to stay alive? How does that work? Does it eat its own lunch? How could it be half organic? Organic meaning living material. Myers says, "Many thanks, Ascot. That is really very kind of you. But do believe me, on the one hand," get it? "On the one hand, I can no more imagine myself a life with 2 arms. On the other hand, I know very well that I have not lost my arm without purpose and sense. The accident and the loss had to be. By that event, I have learned immensely much, and will further on learn still some more." Well, the Pleiadians told him he was going to lose his arm. They told him how, and he did. And they told him that he needed to learn some lessons, and that's why he would lose his arm. Now they're telling us that there's a purpose to everything. So all those people who believe in God, that part of it seems to be true, according to the Pleiadians. There's a purpose to everything, and he's telling her, "I have learned immensely much, and I will continue to learn still more, but I don't want the arm." Ascot says, "These thoughts are worthy of you. I just thought that a help in certain ways would be of service to you." Now look, he's done without the arm for a long time. This is 1975, and he lost the arm in 1965. So he's been 10 years without the arm. He has a chance to have an arm back, a half-organic apparatus, and he's rejecting it. Myers says, "I really thank you very much, Ascot." Now the excuses. "But I do not want it." And here's the first excuse. "You know that such an apparatus would also conjure up many earth troubles. We have many others there who have also lost legs and arms, who would then desire such means, and against whom it would be unfair for me to conceal such from them." Well, look, I thought about this when I was out in the yard yesterday, and here's what I came up with. They could back engineer this, and your gift would enable all those people to have prostheses much earlier than they would otherwise. There's nothing wrong with borrowing this kind of technology. So let me read the next sentence. "To this, moreover, is added the problem that many of those humans, if they had such helping devices, would again become unappreciative forms of life." That is a lame excuse. He says, "You know, things being as they are, that the human being falls again into materialism, if only he," I don't know what that means, "if only he me well up again." I can't figure out what it means. Let's read it this way, that the human being falls again into materialism, if only it would well up again. That's the best I can do. Now the next excuse. "On the other hand, scientists and governments would discover the matter, and this could lead to catastrophe. If I had such a semi-organic apparatus or prosthesis, then for sure I could not conceal it for long. The consequences would be that they would take it away from me to examine and study very thoroughly. And if it was semi-organic, then a way for understanding and duplicating the details may not take long, from which scientists could then produce robots and similar things. In our present society, these would be used for evil war-connected purposes, possibly catastrophic for Earth." Lame excuse, Billy. Now let's read between the lines of what he really means. If I accept this arm and I get used to having an arm, I'm going to be so happy again, and they're going to take it away from me, and I'm going to be so sad again. I don't want the emotional roller coaster ride, and so I'm just going to pass. I think that's what he's really saying. So he ends it by saying, "as enticing as your offer is." So you see, he does want it. He just can't handle the emotional side of it. "As enticing as your offer is, Ascot, Just for those reasons, I could not accept it. And she should have said at that point, just wear it for an hour. That's all I ask. 1 hour. And he wouldn't be able to give it up. My God, when he reaches out and claps his hands or uses 2 hands to take a lid off a jar or something, he would not want to be without that other arm. So anyway, Asket gives up. She says, those are unselfish words, dear friend, and you are right in them too. I allowed myself to be guided by my compassion. And she's ready to say some more, and he interrupts her. Well, I thought he interrupted her, but he didn't. There was considerable discussion of plans and missions and a number of other things. And the transmission Meyer received in that first sitting after his return filled scores of pages. We have only been able to extract a little here, disconnected parts that seem to be of special interest to causal students of this phenomenon, or that might answer some of the scores of questions so often raised about this case. The whole thing is highly exotic and difficult to believe under any circumstance. I wish I had privy to those pages, scores of pages. I want to know more about these people. The Dowells are really interesting. How did they come out looking just like us, except for the long earlobe that comes out in front? This Asket comes from a different universe, and she has emotions just like us. She has an intelligence just like us. She looks just like us. How could that be? And how far apart are these universes? Are they 15 degrees apart? Are they 90 degrees apart? I mean, how do they coexist? Lots of questions. Next paragraph. It looks like author's notes. Almost immediately after returning from the big trip with his exposed rolls of film, Meyer took them to his regular commercial photo processing company to be developed. Meyer and the group waited anxiously. They all wanted to see the spectacular pictures. Finally, the slides and prints were ready to pick up, which took a lot of money from the number of rolls of film exposed and the small number of people who had to pay for them. Well, folks, what do you think? You think the pictures came out beautiful, or do you think they were all ruined? Or do you think that some of them came out really nice and some of them were ruined?